to the Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll module and get started on our department codes to begin with here. Okay, so as we can see in the last webinar, here is our navigation screen. The codes are all set up here under Common Tasks. We can go ahead and access any of the codes here, or as in Professional, you can access the codes from the menu as well. Same codes here. So we'll start with the department codes here. The department codes are designed to tell Cougar Mountain how the payroll transactions are going to post through to your other modules. Specifically, your general ledger module, expense accounts and liability accounts and so forth is where you would set it up under the department codes. For today's purposes, we've got one department set up and labeled it Department 1. Oh, actually, we've got the admin department. We've got several in this demonstration. We'll use the admin for this example. Okay, so the way you set this up is you've got your three different tabs, your tax expense accounts, wage expense accounts, and benefit expense accounts. Those are your general ledger accounts that you will be posting through for the admin department or whatever department you set up. On the tax accounts, you can set up default accounts for your federal tax code, Social Security expense, that's the employer portion, the Medicare expense, and the unemployment expense. You can also set that up for your state and local tax codes as a default account for all state and local tax codes that you want to post through to your general ledger expense accounts. Or you have the option to set up specific general ledger accounts for specific tax codes. If you have multi-state payroll and you want to track the expense account that it is posting to in the general ledger separately for whatever state you're going to, you can set that up here in the grid under whichever codes apply in your system. Okay, and on your wage expense accounts, you've got several different types of pay that you're going to pay your employees. You would set the expense account for each type here. You can use the same account for each one, or if you want to track those separately in the general ledger under the expense, set a separate expense account here of where that's going to post through when you post the payroll batches. On your benefits expense account, you can set a default account for all benefits to post through to the general ledger, or you can set a specific benefit expense account for each of the benefit codes that you have set up, which when we get to benefit codes, we'll talk more about that. But you can set the specific benefit expense account by department using the department code here. Or when we set up the benefit code, I'll show you where you would set up the expense account for the benefit, but not by the department instead, if you would rather do it that way. Okay, so that's pretty much how you would set up your department codes, tax, wage, and benefit expense accounts set up. You can also use departments to track separate payroll departments for reporting purposes in the payroll module as well. And you can set up the same expense accounts for more than one department if you so choose. For our demonstration, we have 4 or 5 different departments set up here, as you can see by examples of how these are set up. Tax, wages. In this case, we have a separate wage account for the sales department than we do for administration department. Okay, and now moving on from the department codes, we go to our tax codes. Now, when you first install the payroll module, the tax codes come pre-installed with the payroll module with your demonstration company. However, if you are converting your data from professional, make sure that you have the most up-to-date tax codes in the professional module before you convert your data to Denali, because when you do the conversion, it will also convert your tax codes as well and import them as part of your Denali setup. Basically, the tax codes are your tax tables. You've got the tax tables that and they're all together here. You've got your federal tax table here. Then you've got different state and local tax tables that you can put in here as well. So we'll go ahead and open the federal tax table, and I can show you kind of how this compares with professional and how to set this up. With your federal tax table, what you do here is if you have accounts payable integration turned on here in Payroll, you would set which accounts payable vendor you are going to be posting the taxes to as a bill for when you run payroll. So you can enter a bill, for example, the withholding taxes on the federal tax code will be posting through to a vendor we have set up called withholding fed. Then you have your employee Social Security set up to a FICA vendor, employee Medicare set up to a vendor, same with employer, those go to the same vendor. Then our unemployment we have set up to going to a vendor called Paper Supply. Why Paper Supply? I don't know, but that's what they have set up in our demonstration. Basically, you would select which vendor from your vendor list here. This is a list of all of our vendors from Accounts Payable module. You can select which vendor you want to set that to on any one of these. That is our tax table. When you import your most up-to-date taxes from Pro, or when you install the Denali payroll module for the first time, it will have the most up-to-date tax information in the tax table and the most up-to-date rates. The withholding table, this is for the federal tax code. This too will be updated to the most up-to-date information when you import your information from Professional or when you install the Denali payroll module for the first time. What's neat about Denali is we don't have a separate tax code for the different filing statuses anymore like we did in Professional. In Denali, you have one tax code under Federal. That's your federal tax code for all filing statuses. And then you would come in here and you can set the different filing statuses here and set the different filing tax rates accordingly as you have set up here. And that's all done under the same tax code in Denali payroll. And it simplifies things for you there. You can do that with your state tax codes as well. You set up a state tax code, and you can set up in the withholding tables a separate withholding table for the different filing statuses here. Now, the state and local tax codes also have the deductions tab. This is where you would have additional deduction information set up specifically for the state, and it's also set up based on filing status as well. It's all done under the same tax code here. Okay, so that is pretty much the tax codes layout, a simple overview of that. And moving on, we go on to our benefit deduction codes. In Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll, you've got 5 different benefit deduction code types. You have addition, benefit, deduction, garnishment, and tip. Basically what these types are, your addition is going to be a code that you would set up to add additional pay to the employee's paycheck. That is designed for like if you want to set up a bonus pay, or if you want to add commission pay for sales representatives, or if you want to do reimbursement expenses for travel or mileage, you can set up an addition code for that particular purpose to add that pay to their paycheck. A benefit code, what that does is that is something that the company is paying on behalf of the employee, but you're not adding the amount that you're paying to the employee's paycheck. This would be set up for company-sponsored health insurance plans or company matching bonuses for a 401k retirement plan, things like this, adding additional benefits to the employees, but not actually paying them cash for those benefits, just paying out the benefit on behalf of the employee. That's what a benefit code is. We can pull up some examples here. So here's a good example right here, the 401k, for example. That would be a company matching bonus if you are a company that pays a matching bonus to a retirement plan that your employees contribute to. This would be the company portion of that. When setting up a benefit, you would need to also set up a benefit expense account here, unless you set that up on the department codes under the benefit tab that we talked about under department codes. If you set it up here, this will override the department code account. If you have it set up in department codes because you're expensing it out by department, you can leave this account blank and you would select the department here. Under the department code here, you would uncheck the box and put the department code in that it would be allocated to specifically. Okay, so for a deduction code, we'll pull up an example of a deduction code here. Here's the 401k deduction. What a deduction code is this is a deduction you're withholding out of the employee's gross pay. And a 401k is a perfect example for that to be used. If the employee is setting aside money for a retirement plan that you are deducting out for them, then you would set that up as a deduction code. You can also use deduction codes to set up employee-paid health insurance premiums that they have. If they have a health plan that the employee has to pay a certain portion of the health insurance premium, that would be under a deduction code. You do not use deduction codes for taxes because those are done under the tax codes. Deduction codes are for other deductions besides taxes. Garnishment is another type of benefit deduction. Basically, a garnishment is a state or a court-ordered deduction, and that is set up with special rules such as percentages, and you set those percentages up by employee, which you can set a maximum percentage for a garnishment. And when we get into the employee setup in a couple of weeks, then we'll go over how to set that up in the employees, where you would set up the maximum percentage for each employee. And then our final is tips. Basically, tips is for service-oriented business such as restaurants. It is set up as an addition code. But Cougar Mountain also has a special category called tips that you can set up and set up a tips code under tips. And it has special functions to keep track of that. Specifically, what that's for is you can set your W-2s to print out the tip amount in boxes 8 and 10 on the W-2, where you would set aside the Social Security tip amount and Medicare tip amount and so forth. That would be tracked through the tips class. And it would be in addition to the employee's pay. That's how that works. Okay, so that covers our benefit deductions codes. Next, we move on to shelter codes. Shelter codes are set up if you want to shelter some of the employee's pay from taxes, or if you want to shelter a benefit or a deduction from taxes, you would set up a shelter code to do that. Now, the way that's done is we'll pull up, for example, the 401k shelter. I'll pull that one up here. This is attached to the 401k benefit and deduction codes. And the way that would work is you would go ahead and set the shelter to, for example, not tax the federal amount. So it would basically pull the deduction out of their gross pay before it calculates federal taxes on it if you have that shelter code set on the 401k shelter, on the 401k deduction code. Also on the benefit code, if you have it sheltered, it will not tax federal withholding tax amounts for the benefit. And you can set that up for the Social Security, Medicare as well on here. And you can also go through and set up your shelter code to shelter from specific states as well. If you want to shelter it from state taxes, you can set the shelter code up to do that as well. And you can set up a separate shelter code for each individual item that you need to set up specifically to shelter if needed. Okay, moving along here. The next payroll code that we have is our leave codes. With Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll, we have 6 main types of leave codes. You've got the 5 main types, and then all the others are just categorized as other. You have vacation, sick, PTO, holiday, compensation, and other. A very common one people use today is PTO. You can set that. You can set up PTO codes that you can have accrue at different rates, or you can have the accrual type be different as well. You can have it accrue per pay period, per unit, which is like per hour. You can set a rate to accrue for every hour they work instead of so much for every pay period. Or you can set it as a general, they accrue monthly, quarterly, every 6 months, or once a year. You can set those up for sick time, PTO, holiday, or others. And we can pull up a couple of examples here of how that works. These are all the different codes we have set up for the leave codes. We've got PTO here, we've got holiday pay here. We'll go ahead and select that one here, and they've got that accruing at 5 per pay period. In this case, it would be 5 hours or 5 units per pay period. The limit is 300 units that they can accrue. That's a good example there. Now, if you have it set up to accrue per unit, then you would have to tell Cougar Mountain which units do we want the accrual to apply. Do we want it to just accrue the regular units? We want to also include overtime units, vacation units, that we're going to be accruing this particular pay. Okay, so our final step here is our status codes. With Cougar Mountain, we have 4 main status types. We have active, inactive, temporary, or terminated. And you can set as many status codes up as you want. A good example to use in this case, we've only got the 4 main codes set up here, but some of you might have seasonal employees. You might want to set up a seasonal code under the active status and another seasonal code under the inactive status. And you can set those seasonal employees, give them a status code that's seasonal for active, and then when they're not working out of season, that would be a seasonal code for inactive, is what you can do on that. This is mostly used for when you're doing your payroll runs. When you actually process payroll, you can tell Cougar Mountain, let's only process payroll for active employees, or let's just process the payroll for the temporary employees, or you can tell it to process both. Basically set up your code name to process a range of codes that you want to set up for that. Okay, so that is the status codes, and that is how you set up all of your department, tax codes, benefit, all the other codes that Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll has set up. And that's basically the background setup process that tells Denali Payroll what to do every time you're running payroll. And all of the information will be processed through according to how the codes are set up. So with that, that's pretty much the end of our webinar today. So we'll go ahead and open up the chat line now to answer any questions. I do have a few questions that have already been put in, so give me just one moment here and we'll get to your questions as quick as we can. Okay, so the first question I have in the chat here from Mary, she was wondering if department codes are the same as program codes that you have in professional. The way that works is with Cougar Mountain in professional and with Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll, program codes are for fund accounting. Department codes are for-profit accounting. So if you are set up as a fund business, a nonprofit, and you've got fund accounting installed, then yes, Mary, that is correct. The system will show it as program codes, not as department codes. And when you set up, another question here is, are GL account numbers required when setting up department codes? GL account numbers are required if you have the general ledger integration turned on, or if you're using general ledger reporting for your posting. If you're only using the payroll module and you're not using the other accounting modules, it is still recommended to put in whatever the account number is in the department code that you use for your other accounting system. If your integration is turned off to general ledger, the account number is not required, but it is recommended. All right, there's a question on here regarding multi-state payroll from Roger. We're going to talk more about how to set up the states for your individual employees when we go over the employee setup in the next couple weeks. But just to quickly answer your question, yes, the Denali payroll module is set up for multi-state. You can change the default state tax code based on the pay rate for that employee. And you can also have an unlimited number of state tax codes in the employees now, whereas with professional you are only limited to 3. In Denali you can have unlimited state tax codes for each employee as you need for multi-state payroll. So that would be a great option for you there. Okay, so a question from Pam. Yes, when you are converting your data from professional to Denali, your tax codes that you have set up in professional will automatically transfer over to Denali. That also goes with department codes, benefit deduction codes. All of your other codes that you have set up in professional will convert over to Denali payroll. So you won't have to re-enter all of your codes again. And all of your tax codes will be pre-installed for you too, so for the specific tax code, and that's for setting up new companies. If you're converting existing company data, the tax codes that you have set up in the professional will convert over to Denali. Yeah, we'll be talking more about conversion in an upcoming webinar as well. So, okay, so another question we have on here, a question from George, is workers' comp covered in payroll? Payroll normally doesn't process workers' comp transactions, but if you do need to track that, you can set up a benefit deduction code for that. If it's a company paid workers' comp, you can set up a benefit code, or if it's an employee paid or a combination of both, you can set up the deduction code for that. Most workers' comp is company paid, but it's not basically included in the regular setup of Denali Payroll. It's similar to professional is how that works. All right, so another question I have on here from George. He's asking what features or functions will be available in Release 2. At this time, we don't know what's going to be available in Release 2 because we are still working on getting the whole thing put together for Release 1. So once we get Release 1 put together, we'll be adding the additional functions that are needed for Release 2 at the time that they're needed, and we'll try to get as much as we can done. Another question from Roger. He's asking if PTO and comp are the same. They're calculated real similar in Denali, but you can separate those out. So that's why they have two separate categories, so you can have them separate on separate line items when you're setting up employees. And we'll go over that more when we get into the employee setup in a future webinar. There's a couple of other questions that we might not get to here in the chat so far. We'll try to get answers to you on those and send those out to you. Question from, we're going to post the questions online, or the answers to your questions online as well. So if we don't get to your answers, check online where we post the webinar information. You should see answers to those. Okay, like a question here from Dick about recalculating simple plans that they have to calculate before the health plans, flex plans. That is something we'll do a little more research on to see if Denali does it differently than Pro, and we'll get that answer posted for you. And then Pam, a question is, how would you track holiday when it does not occur every month? Basically, you can set that to accrue like every quarter, every 6 months, or annual. So that one would be tracked based on how you set the accrual rate. Roger asking if payroll reports pull from inactive employees. Yes, Denali payroll reports do pull from on. You can actually sort on many reports whether you want to pull from active or inactive. Another question for Dick, if you're paying taxes, the payroll doesn't actually have the option to pay the taxes. That would be done in accounts payable. If you don't have accounts payable, you can go to the bank rec module and enter your payments there directly. It doesn't post through, the payments don't post through from payroll. The charges will post through, but not the payments. Yeah, this question for Becky. Yes, garnishments will be set up to calculate after taxes. So the percentage is basically a percentage of the net pay that you would set the garnishment up as. Okay, to answer your question, Mary, about the posting, yes, it will identify the employee names on the posting. All right, just time for a couple more questions here. Okay, for multi-state payroll, we'll talk more about that when we enter in the employee information. Basically, you would just set up the different pay rates at the time they move to another state. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but we will have the questions that we didn't get to posted online with the answers for you. And, of course, you can always give us a call for additional information, but we are going to be covering more detail on how to set up employees for multi-state and the different things, how it goes there. So the upcoming webinars, starting next week, we're going to start setting up employees. And a lot of these questions today will probably be answered as well. So for the next 2 webinars, it'll be about setting up your employees. So be sure to come back for us next week, and we will see you then. Any questions or comments, give us a call, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.